Hi there, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Canton.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And this week we're going to be talking about the most interesting characters. But before we do that, we'll do our before we do our weekly roundup, even we'll do a short little announcement, which is since Ed has left the podcast as a regular co-host, we're now looking for another regular co-host. And the criteria would basically be if you're in the same time zone as us, or preferably, or if you at least are free every week at 8:30 p.m. Central European Time, or 7:30 GMT, on Saturdays, and that you have at least ambitions to be a writer. I guess it's a fairly vague criteria. Yeah. I don't know if you want to add to that, Dave. I think we're not looking for someone who's a massive bestseller or anything.
Yeah, with someone who's got, well, not necessarily someone who's published their first book, but someone who's got some idea about at least publishing their first book, because I am absolutely 100% committed to helping people who haven't got as far as we have. But my thought is, if you're at the point where maybe you've started writing something and you haven't got anywhere with your first draft, you might not be able to participate in the discussions so well. So I think sort of, rather than saying where you should, somewhat looking for someone,
I would say sorry,
participate
Dave, go ahead.
in the discussion. Yes, preferably someone who can keep Simon quiet so I can finish my sentence. Yeah, so if you've got ideas, so not you've got to have published this many books and you've got to have published no more than that many books, but someone who thinks they can participate. I think if you've sort of listened to a few episodes of the podcast, you'll have a rough idea where we are. So take part in that every week or most weeks. I'm not going to say, oh no, you're not going to be a good fit because you haven't published 3 novels or whatever.
I would say the criteria could be that if you haven't published your first novel, that you've at least been writing a lot. Like, not that you just decided this month to become a writer and you've written a little bit. Like you could have, and preferably that you've put out a lot of short stories or flash fiction or something, that you've got some writing that you've finished. It doesn't have to be a full novel, but that you've at least finished some short stories and put them out on some websites or published them or whatever. So that at least I think where Dave and I are both coming from is we don't want someone who is a bit flaky and decides they don't really like writing after a week, and then we're short a co-host again. We'd like someone who wants to go on this journey for a bit longer term than that.
Yeah.
So then we can move on to our weekly roundup. So Dave, you can go first.
Right. Bank holiday weekend in UK, and my wife came back from a conference, and there was an election on Thursday. So I lost, between taking the bank holiday day off, spending some time with my wife because I hadn't seen her, and volunteering to sit outside a polling station with a clipboard for a while. It's been a quite short week for me, but managed to get Drabble done. So it's another Drabble written and published, and people have started indicating they like it. I've picked up comments here and there, so that's still positive. But on the downside, I hit a sudden realization that my character motivation didn't work in a short story that I'm getting ready for submission. So I spent a lot of time sitting there trying to find out where I can move the character so that their motivation is enough to drive them forwards, but it doesn't involve changing something that totally unravels the entire story. So from a all progress is writing, even if you're not specifically putting words on a page perspective, that was quite a productive amount of time. But from an actual feeling like you're writing, spending a couple of afternoons brainstorming ideas and then going, oh no, that won't work, doesn't feel like progress. So it doesn't feel like a good week. But I suppose to someone on the outside looking in, it's been relatively productive.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. A lot of writing is stuff that happens in your head. So it doesn't feel like there's no new words, but if it's that you've worked out a better way of doing it, or even gone through a bunch of ways that won't work, so you can eliminate them, that's still progress.
Yeah.
For me, I wrote 2 drabbles, one of which I sent to my list, and I've been getting, I said last week, I posted on a Facebook group, I would highly encourage people to do the drabbles to the email list. I've been getting emails back from readers every single week saying, oh, that's interesting, how about this? Or a reader had a great idea. So to give you a short version of this week's drabble, this guy applies, he's got a neural implant, and he applies for a training program to get a physical trainer. And she says, oh, just wait here in the virtual world and I'll go sort that out for you. And then an hour later, she comes back and says, okay, you can return to your body. And he goes back and he's like exhausted and really stiff and everything. And I said on the email, I wish this existed. This would be good. Because you can then do all your brain work while someone else is physically exercising your body.
Yeah.
And then one of my readers wrote and said, I wonder what heinous thing she's doing with his body that makes him so sore. I went, oh, that's a good idea for us, bigger, like maybe a short story or something bigger. Like that she's using it for something other than just physically exercising him.
There was a film about that, I think. The social media thing, you could hire, people lived in, effectively, it was sort of like Facebook City or Twitter Town or whatever. And you rented your body out. So people could hire your body to do things. And I think the people who were renting it out had interesting skills. So they had a reasonable level of athleticism and so on. It was about like Second Life, if Second Life still exists well enough for people to know what I'm talking about, only it was real people instead of computer avatars. And it was, and the plot of that was someone was doing something nefarious. It was might be another, I don't know if it's the same film or a different one, where some of it is the convicts renting their bodies out for a Call of Duty style thing.
Yeah, Gamer.
Gamer, that's it. Yeah, Gerard Butler?
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, sort of if someone can rent your body out, if someone can tell your body to do the exercise, then yeah, they could muggings, rob banks, do lots of things.
It depends. I think the creepier, for that idea, the creepier the better, because you want it that you don't want that someone's just robbed a bank and then like they come back and the police go, oh, we're putting you in prison for robbing a bank, because that's kind of humdrum. You want like some really creepy serial killer has taken your body and done heinous crimes with it or something.
Oddly, I was having a conversation with Misha Burnett. Well, not a conversation, there was a social media conversation, and about the difference between a thriller and classic pulp and sort of noir and the more high concept ones. And he was saying that in a standard thriller, a woman dives into a taxi and you drive off and she's trying to escape from her ex-boyfriend who's a mobster or something. But in pulp, it starts off the same, but it turns out she's not trying to escape from her ex-boyfriend. She's trying to escape from a cult who think that she's destined to give birth to them or something. So it's not actually fantasy, but the motivation of the people who've got the inciting incident have done is big and odd. So it can be a straight thriller in terms of reality is real and there isn't magic, there aren't monsters, but yeah, it's got that creepy edge to it that makes you go,
like your drabble this week that you sent out. That was pretty creepy.
Oh, yes. That was my mother said. My mother said I could be anything I wanted, so I became your friend. About someone who learns to mimic perfectly and then steal someone's skin so they can be them.
Yeah. And then, continuing my weekly roundup, then the only thing other than that I did was a couple of thousand words on the new Dragons and Magic book. And the reason I've been doing so little writing is because my day job is getting crazy hectic. So as anyone who's been watching this for a while probably knows that I was working on Writer Tracker. So I told my bosses in work about that, and they told their bosses, and now the entire company is going to move over to the way Writer Tracker is made, which is great. The trouble being that then I am the center of attention. I was saying to my son, you know how busy, you know how vital you are based on how many meetings you're in each week. And I'm in about 10 meetings next week, and 3 of them are 3-hour meetings. So, which then the trouble is I don't have time to make anything. If I'm sitting in meetings like for half of the week, then that's half of the week I'm not actually fixing stuff. So then it's been 10 to 12-hour days on my day job, and then I know how much brain work is involved in my day job by how many podcasts I get through. So if it's just routine work, then I can listen to a podcast. But when it's really, really tough brain work that I'm thinking the whole day, then I haven't listened to any podcasts at all. So I'm 5 episodes behind on self-publishing podcasts at this stage, which normally is the number one thing I always listen to. So it just shows that I just haven't stopped using my brain for weeks. So, which means unfortunately then I'm cutting back on my ambitions for how many books I'm going to write this week. Or this year, I mean.
I was going to say this week? Yikes.
Only 3 this week. No, so last year I wrote 6 books, I think, and the year before was 5, and the year before that was 4. So I was going to try and do another 6 this year at least, but now I'm thinking maybe 1 or 2. I'm definitely going to get the Dragons and Magic one done. It might take me longer than I thought, but I'll get it done. But then I'm not sure if I'll get a second book done. I'm going to try. So, but what that means is that Writer Tracker at the moment is kind of stuck in stasis as it is at the moment. So it kind of works, but it's a bit chunky. But once I work out the bugs on my day job side, then I can port those over to the Writer Tracker side, and then it'll be much more stable. I've already seen that the load times for a screen went from 1.44 seconds to 66 milliseconds, which is a fairly good improvement.
But that's noticeable.
So 1.4 seconds, you're waiting while it goes round. 66 milliseconds, it's just bloop, it's up, which is kind of what would be good. If Writer Track was that fast, it makes it almost like using an application on your desktop. Anyway, enough about that. We'll go on to our topic. So the most interesting characters. So I thought I phrased it like that because I thought we could talk about characters that we've found fascinating and why we think they're so interesting. So you've mentioned before Sherlock Holmes, Dave, for instance, which.
Yes.
So he's obviously a very popular character. Has been adapted for TV and movies hundreds of times, probably at this stage. The books are still read, obviously, 150 years now at this stage, I guess, or thereabouts. So what is it about Sherlock Holmes, for example, that makes him an interesting character? Why do people want to read and watch about Sherlock Holmes?
I've been thinking about why I like characters, why they interest me, and for me, I came up with a triad of things that don't necessarily all have to be there, but there have to be an amount of them. So plausibility, flaws, and curiosity. So the character has to actually, to be interesting to me, feel like they could exist. And obviously, if the world is really very different, then the character can be really very different. But they have to feel like they could exist, so they aren't a character that's been written. I want to get beyond the I am reading a book into I am experiencing a story. And so one way to do that is to get rid of the this doesn't feel like a person would do that. Secondly, the flaws. I want there to be challenge, so they have to start not able to just breeze through the problem, because otherwise, why am I interested? I read a couple of chapters, I know that they're going to solve it, and it's like watching someone play a video game. It's kind of fun sometimes, but you can wander off in the middle, make yourself a cup of tea, come back, and they're still blowing away aliens in Halo or whatever. It's more visual stimulation rather than actually an engaging experience. And for the so for the curiosity, they have to be engaged in the world. I want them to actually do things rather than just sit there and let it happen. So as I say, it doesn't have to be all of them. But for Sherlock Holmes, he's desperately curious about the world. He gives you an insight into what it's like to live in a world where you see all these little things. Because most people, we don't. And you think about it, usually your day is, you get up, you put on your clothes, you clean your teeth, you have breakfast, you do whatever your morning routine is, you head out the house, you follow the same route you follow almost every morning, passing the same people, passing the same things. You go, you do your day routine, you come home, bimbly, bimbly, bimbly. That's it, sort of 5 days a week. And so you don't notice most of what's going on around you. But for me, one of Sherlock Holmes' primary interests is that he shows world where you see things differently. You see a little smudge of red clay on someone's shoe, and you see someone smoking a pipe in a pub 2 days later, and you put those two things together somehow, and it tells you a little story, and that gives you the solution. So Sherlock Holmes's flaws aren't really interesting to me. So he's an addict. He's not a very pleasant person, but the flaws aren't really what drives him. So it's not, oh, is Sherlock Holmes going to be able to solve this because he's an addict, so maybe he'll have to overcome his addiction? So, well, he never really overcomes his addiction, so his problems aren't plot relevant. He is plausible enough person, though, because there are people out there who spot things, and he doesn't.
Well, I mean, sorry, Dave. The latest TV show speculates that maybe he's on the autism spectrum. That's why he's awkward with people and is able to spot things that others can't.
Exactly. So this is the thing. Is sort of he's plausible enough as a person. You could go, well, this person could exist, and he's got an interesting perspective on the world. He's curious about things. He shows the reader something they aren't otherwise seeing. Is sort of, to flip it round a minute, sort of most people, if you told a story about my day, I could probably write an interesting story about my day, but it wouldn't be interesting because of the things I did. It will be interesting because of the way I describe the experience. So if I read a book about myself written by me, I would probably find it the most tedious thing in the world, because it doesn't provide me with anything new, a new experience of any kind. And I like my writing, but I don't think sort of reading an entire novel just because I like my word usage would engage me with me as a character. It might engage with me as a poet or a linguist, but it wouldn't make the character of Dave interesting.
But if you went back to it in 10 years' time, when you've forgotten all the events, then it would become the most fascinating thing ever, because you would see your own thought process and go, wow, I'm a completely different person now.
Yeah, that's sort of what I mean. It's putting you in a different headspace is one of the things that make characters interesting.
Like, when you were saying that, I was thinking of Karl Pilkington.
He was the Idiot Abroad guy, was he? Was he the Idiot Abroad guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the reason he's fascinating, he's not a character, obviously, it's a real person. But the reason he's fascinating is because, again, he looks at things in a completely different way than anyone else. Like he said, you never see a homeless man eating a Twix. Which is just, who has that thought? Who has ever gone, you know what, I've seen homeless people eating Mars bars, I've seen them eating Snickers, I've never seen them eat a Twix. Who thinks like that? Which is where, as you say, like, you're putting yourself in someone else's head who is thinking in a completely different way. One thing I was going to say that draws me to characters, mirroring your thoughts, is that the character is true to themselves the whole way through. But they also, the characters that I think I like best and most people like best are really good at something. Usually just one thing, but something. So Rocky, for instance, in the first movie at least, and some of the movies other than that, is very true to himself. He's never goes, oh, well, you know, the square root of whatever is this. He's always blockheaded and just stubborn, but he will put himself 100% into his boxing and train like crazy.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is right, that we follow characters for their good traits and forgive their bad traits. I think if their bad traits weren't there, they just become a Gary Sue or a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
So you have to have something. You can't have. If Rocky was, if you cross Rocky with Matt Damon and the thingy where he's a mathematician, if you cross them together, that he's Goodwill Hunting, that he's a super smart mathematician who has gifts that no one else has, and he's also the best heavyweight boxer in the world, then people might go, okay, this is kind of getting ridiculous. Although if you played it right, if you played it like a bit more tongue-in-cheek, you could get away with it, but it's not really.
I think if you put that character into the right story, but the villain would have to be similarly talented, or the challenge would have to be similarly slightly complex. So he's a brilliant mathematician and he's an exceptional boxer. So he's going to be saving the world from alien invasion in something that's got lots of explosions and so on, potentially.
I would say that if you have those two skills, then you would give him a terrible interpersonal skills. And then it relies on him being a diplomat. So yeah, he's incredibly smart, he's incredibly tough, but he's terrible at speaking to people, and he now has to negotiate peace for Earth, all the Earth things against the aliens.
Yeah,
or something else that strength and smarts don't cover. Which is kind of, I guess, the point as well, that you want to put the characters up against a plot that doesn't. Yeah. That doesn't cater to their skills. They need to use their skills. There's no point in them being a great boxer and they never get into a boxing ring or do anything else like that. Yeah. But you don't want every challenge that they meet to be just punch someone in the face. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the thing. We start on the start of the book. You want a character who's got this worldview we don't have, but is also plausible enough that we can develop sympathy for them. We can feel that actually we want to follow this story, because fundamentally the character is the reader's camera and microphone and so on the world. So you want someone who you click with them. You want to follow with this person. You want to see the world through their eyes, hear it through their ears, and so on, feel it the way they feel it. And then their flaws come in later in the book, because we want to, once we've got this love for the character, once we care about the character, we want to see them succeed. But because of the way, I don't know whether it's neurological or social conditioning, because of the way we think about things, for success to be meaningful, almost everyone wants it to have been success when it wasn't guaranteed. So it's only meaningful if there's work for it. So sort of from a few chapters in through to the end of the book, they have to be working against the odds for their victories to feel meaningful, at which point we get that buzz of, well, it wasn't guaranteed they'd do it. It's that sort of, the aliens are made out of smoke and use a different kind of mathematics, so you can't differential box them to death. To parody the Ron L. Hubbard for a while. A different form of chemistry indeed. But the character has to struggle and succeed, because we want to see characters we like succeed.
Is just thinking, is the point of their flaws perhaps so that they're not entirely superior to us? Because in real life, if someone is superior to you in every way, then you tend to call them an arrogant prick and say, "Oh, I don't like him or her."
Yeah, it's true. But I don't know if it's we want characters we would be friends with, or whether we want characters where we can feel that it's possible that people could be friends with them. Because not necessarily. It doesn't even necessarily apply to characters who are arrogant, because if you take someone who is like brilliant at things and genuinely pleasant and self-effacing, and you can recognize intellectually that they're doing a great thing, and when you're with them, they're polite and reasonable, and they don't annoy you by rubbing it in your face that they're smart. They pull back. They use their skills to sort of facilitate everyone succeeding, and still they're not your friend. You don't have this ability to interface with them. So I think it's said that our flaws speak to each other. And there's a sort of Sartre, and so said that if you have an issue, the first person you'll think of taking it to is the person who will give you the answer you actually want to do. So your instinctive feel for who you want to face adversity with is someone who will give the kind of answer that you would give if you weren't tangled up in your emotional reactions and the fact that the little bit of your brain that puts, well, I can't do that because people might look at me oddly, gets in before you've had a chance to realize what you're thinking. So, yeah, potentially characters who are flawed in a way we can understand, or we feel some sense of this person is like me. They're not irritatingly perfect.
Is it, this is complete speculation, but is it that they then have a problem that we think we could solve? So, for instance, with Sherlock Holmes' addiction, those of us who are not addicts or who are recovering addicts might go, "Oh, well, you could just stop doing the cocaine."
That I think that does balance it out, because Sherlock Holmes could solve crimes in ways that I can't. I mean, even if Conan Doyle hadn't done a bait and switch and left half the evidence out in the stories, so some of them you don't actually get the evidence before Holmes tells you what the answer is. Sort of, even if you got all the evidence, probably I couldn't get there before he did. But he can't. He needs the addiction to function, or he can't stop the addiction. So it stops him being irritating. And we think, well, yeah, he's not perfect. So I can't do all the things he could do, but I can solve this. But on the other hand, I think for a character to be interesting, they have to not make too many mistakes that we wouldn't. As I find it incredibly frustrating in sort of films when people don't look up or don't do obvious things. There's a serial killer out there, and sort of they're chasing him, turn the corner, and can't see him, and no one ever looks up. Or when the hero's doing it and the bad guys are chasing him, and the hero like hops up and braces himself above the door lintel. And after watching a number of Hollywood blockbusters, one of the things I think when that happens on screen, sort of like someone goes around a corner, you follow them and they're not there, is I wonder if they've gone up. And so people who are supposed to be guards not thinking that. So I don't get that, haha, I'm smarter than they are, so they're not perfect feeling. I get that, but how could you not think to look up?
Well, that nicely segues into what I was thinking of talking about next, which is villains, where a character is only as strong as the villains they're up against as well. So Holmes has Moriarty, obviously, and various others. Or I was thinking of Blofeld for James Bond, or because if you ask people about James Bond, who's the villain you think of, it's always Blofeld. It's never like, oh, remember Dr. No, or remember the man with the golden gun. No, it's Blofeld.
Scaramanga.
Scaramanga, yeah, that's right. But people would immediately think of Blofeld. And I think that's because, so James Bond is good at, he is really a Gary Sue. But most of the structure of the plot, or the flow of the movie, is about him outsmarting people, not so much like he's figuring out the mystery. He's not going around shooting people until he eventually shoots the guy who's doing the thing. He's trying to figure out why why is Blofeld driving this car across Europe or whatever. Yeah. And I was thinking that the villains that are the most engaging are the ones that have the same trait as the main character, but are usually more established in that trait. So they're in Rocky. You've got Apollo Creed is more established and a better boxer than Rocky. Or the one I keep thinking of is Goon. You've got the guy who's been punching people in the face in the ice hockey for 25 years or whatever. That it's always someone who's more established in that trait. Or Moriarty is the most famous Sherlock Holmes villain because he is Holmes' equal in terms of brain power. Yeah. So I think that's quite an important thing as well, because it kind of pushes the main character in the direction of their main trait.
I think also, I think it plays into perspectives, because if you take Moriarty and Sherlock Holmes, the thing they have in common is they're both highly intelligent master strategists. So it takes this is Holmes's perspective on the world and goes, and here's a different perspective that's almost the same but comes out completely differently. So it gives you that sort of dark mirror, as it were.
Yeah, definitely. So essentially they can be almost the same character, just circumstances are slightly skewed, which makes them react differently to different situations.
Yeah.
Grant, we're kind of coming up on our normal time. Was there anything you had to add at the end, Dave?
I don't think so, no.
Grant, so we'll end there. Thank you all very much for watching, and we shall see you next time.